Okay, so today, just we're going to continue in order. Last week we did step 6 and 7 from the AA 12 and 12. So we're going to continue on with amends. So if you have your big book, let's jump in on page 76. Carol, thank you for opening us in prayer. And I just want to read the 7 step prayer because that's kind of our segue into the amends. So the second paragraph there says, when ready, like ready to have God remove all our defects. Oh, and today I thought a cool thing to do as we're doing the amends thing is to look for what it says about God in these pages. This is a very action oriented step, things we do to make amends. But let's try to look for God. Like, where is he hidden? What does it say about him? So it says, when ready, we say something like this: My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We have then completed step 7. So, a couple things I want to point out what it says about God, like my creator. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I needed and I still need to be recreated. And God isn't in the just once and done business, He's in the recreating and recreating. So, He's our creator, and I'm giving Him all of me, the good and the bad. And then I ask that he remove every every defect of character that stands in the way of my usefulness to God and my fellows. So that tells me about God. He has the ability to remove my defects of character. So grateful for that because I certainly don't on my own. I do the same things, bad things over and over again, but he can change me. And we ask him to remove all the defects of character that stand in the way of my usefulness to God and to my fellows. So that means we can be of use to God. I mean, that's pretty cool, right? For if you were like me and thought, why am I here? Why am I here? I have no purpose. We have a purpose to be useful to God. And then we ask God to grant us strength to do his bidding. So that means he has a bidding, he has a will for us. We've then completed step 7. So I ask for him to remove my defects of character. He decides which ones to remove, and then he does it. And then it tells us now we need more action, without which we find that faith without works is dead, right? Remember, we could believe in God and it could be totally irrelevant to our lives. So it says, okay, now let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of the people we hurt and to whom we're willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. So if you were here when we talked about step 4, part of how I ask my girls to do step 4 is you do your defects, resentments, fears, and then harms. So we have a list. It's on our website. Who we hurt, what we did, how it hurt the person, what we should have done instead. And we do that, all of that in step 4. There's a 5th column that now we fill out on step 8, which is what should the amend be? And I like to think of it as like those balancing scales. You know, that lady, I think it's Lady Justice maybe, who's holding up 2 scales. And so if I've hurt someone in some way, the scales are out of balance. So the amends are how I'm going to set things back into balance. So that's why I need to know how I specifically hurt someone. If I punch them in the nose, well, if I cost them a $2,000 doctor bill, I need to pay them the $2,000 back. If I embarrass them and cause them stress, I need to do something to relieve stress in their lives. So we've got our list, and it says we subjected ourselves to drastic self appraisal. Remember, the book says we must be hard on ourselves, but considerate of others. Being hard on ourselves gets a bad rap from like therapists and other people these days, but it means really seeing myself as I am. And I can do that because I have assurance, right, back from step 2, that God loves me. So that gives me the courage to really go deep and see like my ugly defects and the harms I've done. And it says the point of the amends, we attempt to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. So if I look back, I could see that all of my harms were caused because I tried to live on self-will. You know, I had to make amends for stealing perfume and clothes from stores. Well, of course, total self-will. Make amends for the times, that I've been unkind to people. Self-will, right? I want people to react the way I want them to on my timetable. And it says, if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. Well, who do we ask? Like, do we ask our sponsor, our husband? No, we ask God. So, what does this tell us about God? If I don't have the will to do something that I need to do, I ask Him, I pray for it, and He grants it to me. Because it says we ask until it comes. It doesn't say we ask and maybe it'll come. We ask and the willingness will come. And then it reminds us, because this is a hard time, it says, remember, it was agreed at the beginning we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol or food, willing to go to any lengths. And so we're at the bottom of page 76. It says, there's probably still some misgivings, that there's some people we don't really feel we want to go to them on a spiritual basis. And then this is really cool. It says, be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. That means like there's probably going to be a second approach. All these people that we've like burnt bridges with, now we're rebuilding bridges with them. So it assumes, now, not always, right? Sometimes we make our amends and that's it. But sometimes relationships get rebuilt. So it says we don't emphasize the spiritual feature. So what would that look like? That would look like going in and saying, I took $50 from you a couple years ago and you didn't know it. But now I've found the Lord and I have to be holy and righteous. So here's $50 back. No, we don't do that. Um, and they say, top of page 77, we'll prejudice them, right? Who wants to be told that? And then listen to this. This is really cool. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order, right? That's why we all came around here. We couldn't stop binging. We wanted to put our lives in order. But this is not an end to itself. Our real purpose, so our real purpose isn't just to get our lives in order. It's to get our lives in order so that we can fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. So again, what does this say about God? That again, telling me He's got a will for me. He's got service for me to do. So it's like there's a shift. We come in order to just stop binging. We don't care about other people. I mean, I don't know about you all, but I certainly didn't. I just wanted to stop binging and throwing up. And then we come and then something happens. We stop binging and then we start caring about being of service to God and other people. Like that becomes important to us. And next week, we'll talk about when it talks about steps 10 and 11, that our job for the rest of our lives, once we go through these steps, is to grow in understanding. And I believe that's like understanding of God and effectiveness, being more effective in our relationships with other people. So back to amends, it says it's not wise to approach an individual who we've hurt and announce we've gone religious. That lays ourselves open to being called fanatics or religious bores, and it might kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message, right? If I say, here's a $50 back because I've seen the light, I've found the Lord, and I just can never do stuff like that. And I give them the $50 and they never want to see me again, so that when their daughter, God forbid, has an eating disorder, they won't think to call me. They'll just say, oh yeah, there's that crazy lady who gave me my $50 back. It says, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong, more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. And I think that works in our homes too, right? In our relationships. If I just go around clamoring to my husband and kids about, I've seen the light, I've found the Lord, but I don't do anything to be useful around the house, that's not really helpful. That's not really good. They're not going to care about that. Okay, but then they qualify it. They say, we don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. So I'll come back to kind of the best way to make approach. When it will serve any good purpose, we're willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. It says, what about the person we hated? And look how it puts it in the past tense. We hated, not hate. Because if we've done these steps, right, when we do our resentments, the people we haven't forgiven, we pray for them for a while. And I think we all know that like 2 week resentment prayer that we say. If you don't, Stephanie will throw it in the chat. But I have never found that I've gone 2 weeks and it hasn't been lifted, and I've stopped, I don't like to use the word hate, but being very resentful at somebody. So it says, even if there's someone we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It means we do it anyway. Say it's harder to go to an enemy than a friend, but it's much more beneficial. I think when we do things that are hard for us spiritually and we really humble ourselves, that's when we grow. So it says we go in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling, not if the person doesn't know about it. We don't walk up to someone who we didn't like, who had no idea, and say, I used to not like you, and I'm really sorry. No, this is if they know there's bad blood between us. And we express our regret, and it says, under no condition do we criticize that person or argue. So there's a time for discussions, especially like in families. I'll talk about that. But so basically, if I have a sponsee and she says my husband is difficult, or my kids are difficult, then I say, okay, until you are through the steps and have made your amends, you are not to say anything, criticize anything, bring anything up unless it's dangerous. Like if your husband is letting your 3-year-old kids play on the front lawn where there's traffic, without watching them. Okay, you can bring that up. But basically, until you make your amends, nothing. And it says, simply we tell him we will never get over drinking until we've done our utmost to to straighten out the past. We're there to sweep off our side of the street. So here's what I advise my sponsees to do when they're ready to make the amends. They tell the person, you know, I have a problem with compulsive eating, or I have an eating disorder, and I'm in a 12-step program. And part of my recovery process is I had to go back and look at the people I've harmed. And your name came up. That's someone that I have harmed. 3 years ago, I took $50 from your wallet. If I don't make amends, I can never recover. Here's the $50 back. I'm really sorry. Okay, so that's different than saying, I've seen the light, I found the Lord, here's your $50. I'm saying that I have to do this because otherwise I'm not going to recover. And here it is, and I'm really sorry. And so again, page 78, it says, his faults are not discussed. If our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the results. And it says, page 78, first full paragraph, in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes the person admits their own faults. I found that a lot with my son when I would make amends and say, Daniel, I'm sorry I did blah, blah, blah. He would say, that's okay. And I did that and we're good. And, it's fine. That happens a lot when we admit our own faults. The other person does too. It says, rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. People praise what we're doing. Sometimes they offer assistance. It says, it should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. That actually happened to me once. I was new in recovery. I had a job, and my boss had told me not to do something. but I didn't think he was right, so I did it anyway. And then I had to go back and tell him what I did. I think he threw a soda can at the door and threw me out of his office. He didn't fire me though, but I was able to have a clean conscience and not eat compulsively. Even if someone throws us out of their office, it's okay. We're responsible for doing our part. Then it talks about owing money, and it says we don't dodge creditors. We tell them, why we're making the amend. And if we don't have all the money at once, we arrange terms. And it says, our drinking has made us slow to pay. We must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we're liable to drink if we are afraid to face them. I think that's really important. Sometimes people say, well, if someone is in the food eating compulsively, then it means they haven't taken a first step. And here they're saying, no, someone could be owe someone a lot of money and be unwilling to pay it. And it says, we are liable to drink. We are liable to eat compulsively if that's the case. So someone owes money and goes out and binges because she's not willing to pay it, the absolute worst thing to do for that person is to say, let's start over on step one and read the doctor's opinion again. The right thing to do, in my opinion, is to say, okay, you owe money, go pay the money, go make that amend and make terms. I remember once a young woman called me. She said, can you sponsor me? I can't stop. And I said, how far did you get with your sponsor? And she said, I got up to the amends and I binged. And I said, are there any amends you're not willing to make? And she said, yeah, there were three I wasn't willing to make. And I said, before we go any further, you need to go make those three amends, right? Because that's going to block us. Then it talks about perhaps we've committed a criminal offense which might land us in jail. And page 79, again, they say, reminding ourselves we've decided to go to any length to find a spiritual experience, we ask, okay, who do we ask? God. We ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences. So here they're telling us that God gives us strength and direction when we ask for it. They tell us we may lose our position, reputation, or face jail, but we're willing. And then, lest, we all run out and do things that are going to get us arrested, they're saying, but hold up. Usually, other people are involved. We're not supposed to be the hasty and foolish martyr who needlessly sacrifices others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. So we want to be really careful here. Top of page 80, it says, before taking drastic action, which might implicate other people, we secure their consent. So if I have to say something that might land me in jail, I need to talk to my husband about it first. If we have obtained permission, consulted with others, it's really important that we go and we ask some recovered people and get some good advice. Ask God to help. We have a God who helps us. And the drastic step is indicated. We must not shrink. We have to do it. And then they tell a story about a guy who borrowed a lot of money from an enemy. They never tell us why the enemy lent him the money. That's unclear to me. But he borrowed money. And then he said, I never borrowed any money. And he destroyed that other guy's reputation and ruined him, like ruined his business. People thought that other guy was the liar. And he thought, how could I ever make that right? If I talk about it, it'll affect my business, my wife. What do I do? He talked to his wife, he talked to his business partner, and this is what he said. This is bottom of page 80. He came to the conclusion that it was better to take those risks than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. He saw that he had to place the outcome in God's hands, or he would soon start drinking again and all would be lost anyhow. He attended church for the first time in many years. After the sermon, he quietly got up and made an explanation. His action met widespread approval, and today he is one of the most trusted citizens of his town. So, a couple things here. He saw that it was better to risk like losing his business than to stand before his creator guilty of such ruinous slander. So that really makes me think I better be careful before I slander anyone because I'm going to have to stand before my creator one day. So they say we have to be careful. And then he said he saw he had to place the outcome in God's hands or he would soon start drinking anyway and all would be lost. So look how seriously they took picking up a drink. If he drank, all would be lost. Like they took this really seriously. And he said he had to place the outcome in God's hands. Okay, how do we do that? How do we place an outcome in God's hands? We do what we think is the right thing and leave the results up to Him. We take the right action, leave the results up to Him. And then what happened? In God's hands, it all worked out. And it reminds me of that beautiful line on page 100. The things that came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands are better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently be living in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. And this guy is like the perfect example of that. Okay, then it says maybe we have domestic troubles, which means the guys cheated on their wives. Page 81, they say, we doubt if in this respect alcoholics are much or worse than any other people. But drinking complicates sex relations at home. And, the wife gets angry because he's drinking so much. And they say, okay, what are we going to do about it? On page 81, they say, we have to do something about it. If our wife doesn't know, should we tell her? And this is where they say, not always. That if we've hurt someone and they don't know, not always. And so it says, if she does know, she might want to know who the other woman is. And it says, no, we feel we ought to say to her, we have no right to involve another person. Remember, our book says we have no right to save our skin at another person's expense. It says, we are sorry for what we have done, and God willing, it shall not be repeated. So that tells me something about God, that if I'm sorry for something I've done, and I go to him and tell him I'm sorry, with his help, I don't have to keep doing the same rotten things over and over again. God will help us. And it says, we don't wish to lay down any rule here. So if someone has had an affair and they think, should I tell, should I not tell? It's a time you have a serious talk with your sponsor and maybe some other recovered person that you trust. And they say, our design for living is not a one-way street. It's as good for the wife as for the husband. If we can forget, so can she. But it's better that one doesn't needlessly name a person upon whom she can vent jealousy, right? Our book tells us we don't needlessly arouse jealousy. Like Stephanie did today when she said it's 80 degrees where she lives and we're all shivering where we are. Just kidding. Okay, page 82. It says, it may be both will decide that the way of good sense and loving kindness is to let bygones be bygones. And what that tells me is that when people make amends to me, apologize to me, I should accept it with grace, forgive, and forget. It says, each might pray about it, having the other one's happiness uppermost in mind. What a nice way to pray for someone, like, make give them what they need to be like happy, healthy, more important than me being happy. It says, keep it always in sight. We are dealing with that most terrible human emotion, jealousy. So we don't want to needlessly arouse jealousy. And they say, okay, so let's say you haven't cheated on your spouse and, you're just an average run-of-the-mill alcoholic or compulsive eater. It says, There's plenty to still do at home. Sometimes we hear an alcoholic say the only thing he needs to do is keep sober. And they say, well, certainly he has to keep sober, for there'll be no home if he doesn't. But he is a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. Passing all understanding is the patience mothers and wives have had with alcoholics. Had this not been so, many of us would have no homes today, would perhaps be dead. And that tells me that as a mother and a wife, I need to have patience. They're saying it makes a difference. So, thank God I don't have a husband or children who are alcoholic. Um, but sometimes I need to have patience anyway with my children so that it, and it says that can make a difference if we have patience with people, meaning we don't have a demand that they change on our timetable. That makes a difference. And then they tell us what we're like. We are like tornadoes, roaring our way through the lives of others, right? Doesn't that make you think of like the Wizard of Oz when that big tornado took Dorothy's house from Kansas and landed it in Oz? Like they say, that's what we're like. We're tornadoes. We break hearts, we kill relationships, we uproot affections. Our selfish and inconsiderate habits have kept the home in turmoil. So I think it's good for us always to be asking ourselves, how am I selfish? How am I inconsiderate in my home? And they say, a man's unthinking when he says, well, I'm sober, that's enough. It's like someone coming out of a cyclone cellar, right? The Wizard of Oz, remember at the very end, they all come out of the cyclone cellar and say, wind stopped blowing, everything's fine. They say, page 83, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead, and we must take the lead. So people talk about living amends. And generally, the big book doesn't talk about that. The big book talks about direct amends. Um, but what would a living amend be? It's not really an amend, it's like a plan for going forward. And this paragraph gives us a few more things. Remorseful mumbling that we're sorry isn't good enough. We have to sit down with the family, frankly analyze the past, being careful not to criticize them. We have to remember if their defects are glaring, our own actions are at least partly responsible. We ask each morning in meditation that our creator, our recreator, right, shows us a way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. So I just jotted from these 2 pages, if we're going to call it living amends, things we need to do. One, let the past stay in the past. Two, pray for the family members. Three, don't think being sober is good enough. Four, don't criticize. Five, analyze my past. And six, pray. Pray for patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. Now, what my husband and I do, probably not every week now, and this is what I advise people, like once you're through your amends and things are calmed down, to set aside a night, for us it's Sunday night, where we check in, where, I'll say to my husband, is there anything I'm doing that we need to talk about that's bothering you? And he'll ask me the same thing. Is there anything I'm doing we need to talk about? This is what he said last week. I'm not kidding. So I have peanut butter and I keep the tablespoon like on top of the peanut butter in the refrigerator. He said, please don't keep the tablespoon in the refrigerator. Just, I don't like seeing that in there. Put it aside. I'm like, okay. I'm thinking, how lucky am I? If the worst thing my husband could say about me is I keep a tablespoon in the refrigerator, I'm a pretty lucky woman. But we do that. And this way things don't build up that every time he opens the refrigerator, he's getting, agitated at me because he sees a piece of silverware in the refrigerator. And if I tell him things, and then he'll try and fix them. And then this way, there's never that, buildup of resentment. Okay, page 83, second paragraph. The spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. So we have to live it. We practice patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And what is love? It's really self sacrifice for the good of another person. Unless our family expresses a desire to live upon spiritual principles, we don't urge them. We don't have to make them. We don't talk incessantly about spiritual matters. They'll change in time. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. And I've seen that true. When my kids were young, I was like harping on them about, religion and God and how they have to do, and then didn't really help that much. And then I just let it be, and things just got a lot better. Our behavior will convince them more than our words. And it says there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. We don't worry about them. I mean, if someone has passed away, what's often a good thing is to go to the grave and read an amends letter. And if we owed money, we can pay the money to their children. It says some people can't be seen. We send them an honest letter, and there may be a valid reason for postponement. So for now, like if someone said, I'm going to see my relatives who I owe amends to in 3 weeks, it might be better wait in person and just wait the 3 weeks. Here's the way that I think it's best to do it. Best, ideally, is in person. If we can't do it in person, then, FaceTime or Zoom. If we can't do it that way, then call. And if we can't do it that way, then by email or letter. I think that's a good order of priority. It says we should be sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble without being servile or scraping. So that means I may be ashamed of what I did, but I'm not ashamed of who I am. I am like being recreated by God. God loves me enough to recreate me, to have a purpose for me. It says, as God's people, we stand on our own feet. We don't crawl before anyone. But I may need to humble myself and say, I'm sorry. And, often if it's a relationship amend, where we express our sorrow, a good thing afterwards is to say, is there anything else I've done that's hurt you? And then to just listen and not argue back. Just say, thank you for telling me. I'll think about it. And then go back to our sponsor and process it and see if we have to do anything further. And then these beautiful 9-step promises. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. I don't know if that means halfway through our amends or halfway through the steps, but it doesn't matter. It means that if we keep going, we're going to get these promises. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Remember, we started getting freedom in like step 2, where we started getting power over the obsession. And happiness. We will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it because we've made our amends. We can walk down the street and hold up our heads like we've made things right. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace, right? We remember the formula for serenity on page 68. Just as we do as we think God would have us and humbly rely on Him, does He enable us to match calamity with serenity. It says no matter how far down the scale we have gone, or for us, maybe no matter how far up the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That's why we don't regret the past or wish to shut the door on it. Our experience can benefit others. I was talking on a meeting once how I had like faked a rape, and a woman came to me and I sponsored her for a while, and she said, I did that too. So we never know when something in our past is going to enable someone else to feel safe. And then so now our experience can benefit others. And that leads to the next promise. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We don't feel useless because we're able to help others. And there's no self-pity because we start realizing like life is pretty good. We don't feel bad. And if something bad happens, we either say, I set things in motion for this, or we just use it as a chance to demonstrate God's omnipotence, which they talk about in the chapter, The Family Afterwards. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. We'll start caring more about other people. Self-seeking slips away. We don't care so much about things for ourselves. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change because God changes us. Page 25, spiritual experience, where God rearranges us. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. It doesn't say we will all get rich, but it says we won't have economic insecurity and we won't be afraid of people anymore. What could people do to me? Really, what could anyone do? We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. Life just gets easier because our feathers aren't ruffled every time someone says something we don't like. And then this, we will suddenly realize God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Well, that surely says something about God. He does for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. Sometimes I say he removes the food obsession, and that's just his opening act. But look at this. All of these things, they have nothing to do with food. And these are the things God does for us. And they say, are these extravagant promises? Well, they certainly seem that way. They say, no, we think not. They are being fulfilled among us. We don't fulfill them ourselves. They're fulfilled by God. God does this for us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. And then it ends with a promise there. They will always materialize if we work for them, if we do these steps. And then we will pick up next week with step 10. And that is all I have for now.